So what we're doing today is just making a simple little oil pressure gauge so I can test, make sure I can see oil pressure when I fire up the engine on the stand. This is the odometer. It's a 2277, which is a M12 by 1.5, and that is a 1/8 inch NPT pipe thread. And you see we get a little crush washer there. So this is just going to go in the, let's see what we got here. Might be, yep, might be right there. I think that's where the oil pressure line comes out of here into the dash. Yeah, I think that's a return. I'll look at this later. So this just allows me to plug in a simple, this is a cheap gauge, just like $16 gauge with a little nylon line, but it has a pipe thread. So I'm going to put that together and stick it on the engine so I can have oil pressure when I fire it up. So there's my cheap little gauge. I just used the electrical connections to just tie it to the adapter. So I got the adapter and the 1/8 inch MPT and then this little plastic line. So when I fire it up, that'll just, allow me to see that I have oil pressure. So the next thing I'm up to is installing the intake manifold and exhaust manifold. I'm going to put this gasket on. I've got the engine, tilted sideways to make it a little easier. And I just, cleaned up these surfaces with a razor blade. And this really only goes on one way, like that. And it's funny, the service manual has 7 steps. It says when you're removing it, says take off the exhaust pipe, take off the oil feed line and the turbo and the bracket that holds the air cleaner. And I saw this, unscrew supporting bracket for exhaust manifold on engine carrier. So the engine mounts on the side of the engine, supposedly there was a bracket for the exhaust manifold, a support bracket. The engine mount would have gone here, and so supposedly there was a bracket somewhere here. I don't think I had that on this car. This was a 1980 om617.950. And this is a 123 manual, but pretty sure that's what it is. Yeah, it's 617.95. So I don't know, maybe some engines had that. It says to remove them together as one piece, so I'm going to put them back on together as one piece. These are really heavy. But you can see so this is how this goes. Whoops, sorry. There you go. So they share, it's an interesting design. Let me get the camera in here. See, they share mounting bolts. See, there's a half moon. Let me get that a little better. See, like a little half moon bolt hole there. Yeah, so you can see there's little, there's like a half moon. See, it's for half a bolt. Well, the other half is on this side. So, basically you put them together like this and then slide them onto the engine. You cannot put the exhaust on first. They actually do have to go together, and the reason is, see right here where the intake and the turbo go together? there is actually this like coupling seal. So this goes in the turbo, and then this end goes in the intake. And the gasket kit actually came with a new rubber piece for the turbo side. Even though this looks fine, I'm going to go ahead and replace that gasket. That rubber grommet. And then I'm going to mate these two together. And you want to put, coat these with a little bit of oil so it slips in easier. And then go ahead and put it on the engine. All right, there's what it looks like mated together. And I'm just going to put this on the engine all at the same time. So it's pretty heavy, so I got to stop recording, then I'll pick it up and put it on the engine, then record after. I played around with it for a minute, and you can put this one on first, as long as you have this piece in. That's the connector from the turbo to the intake manifold. But since I have the downpipe on, I failed to realize that this has to go ahead and be installed first. Otherwise, whoops, I think it goes this way. Otherwise, I can't install this after this is already bolted on. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that on now. This is the turbo drain back tube. Got intake and exhaust manifold installed. That's a little tricky to do. Like this has to be attached. The drain has to be attached. You can put this one on first and then kind of slide that one onto the drain tube and then shimmy it on there. I had to play around with it for a minute, and but got it on there. This car actually has some battle wounds. I had a air cleaner bracket break, and the air cleaner was resting right there, and man, I didn't pay attention, and so it wore. See, the air cleaner was like shaking right there, and it wore a spot. But anyway, engine's starting to look really good. Whoa, about killed myself. So let me get this valve cover cleaned up. And I think I need to, let's see, I'm going to attach the oil tube, which goes around here. I think that attaches right down there. Let me see if I have that. Here it is. I can throw these injector lines on too. Yeah, let's see. So there's that doohickey. That's going to go like that. I think one of these tabs. There we go. Yeah, one of these tabs was mounted like right there. So I can go ahead and get this guy mounted up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Put the little gasket on there. Right. Got these torqued down. Just from looking at the bolts, I guessed around 36 foot-pounds. Didn't find it in the service manual. I'm missing this bolt, so I need to find that. Also, when I put it together, I noticed that the turbo drain tube was like angled a little bit back. So I just stuck a pry bar, right there against the engine block. And I just nudged it, put a little force behind it, and it straightened out beautifully. I must have bent that during disassembly or something. Anyway, I'm going to start cleaning up this valve cover because I'm getting nervous about accidentally dropping something down in there. All right, it's time to clean this thing up. It's not too dirty. I'm not going to disconnect any of the linkage because there's a little C-clip. For any of you guys that have ever taken this apart, if you lose that, you know, what a pain in the ass. You got to order another one little C-clip. So I'm going to leave it all together and just try not to get solvent on here because it's rubber. And we'll see what it looks like afterwards. All right, here's the after cleanup. I was real delicate in, you know, brushing these because they have that, you know, it's like a gold coating. And if you brush too hard, see what I did there a little bit, it'll brush that off. So if you clean it delicately, you keep that gold protective coating Mercedes put on there. And yeah, man, this came out really, really good. Some mild staining up here. But I'm not going to do the whole polished look. I just want it to be back to factory. And so it came out really good. So I'm going to go get my fresh gasket and throw this on the engine. Okay, I'm about to put the valve cover on, and I just did a nice coating of assembly lube on all the cam lobes, so there's no risk of, you know, dry starting. Wait till the oiling system gets going. And now I'm going to put this valve cover on. Okay, we're getting closer. Got the valve cover on. These have little lock washers underneath them. And they're only torqued to like 10 foot-pounds. You don't want to over-torque these. Doesn't take much, 10 foot-pounds. It's just barely any. You just snug it up. But here's where we're at so far. Starting to look really good. Okay, I've got the little diesel return lines. I didn't have enough. This one right here is actually supposed to come around down below and go through this clip, so it's never, so the throttle mechanism never hits it. But I didn't have enough, so I just ran it behind there. But you always want to use this genuine Mercedes brand. I don't know if Mercedes makes this, but it's the whitish, it's like the gray cloth with the little orange line on it. There's another brand you can get. Let's see. It's this stuff right here. It's this black stuff, and it's absolutely terrible. It doesn't last very long, and it starts weeping, and it leaks. Don't ever use this stuff. This is the stuff you want to use. I'm going to see if I have a plug laying back there somewhere. I'm telling you guys not to use the black stuff. This is the only little piece I have with a plug in it. I just grabbed it out of my little junk bin over there. So this is going on here temporarily, and that plug will just go back here on the back. But I'm going to replace it because this black stuff is really no good. Anyway, this manual says to put these on at 25 Newton meters, but there's no way to. I guess I could use a torque wrench with a crow's foot attached to it, but really there's no way to get a torque wrench on there. So 25 Newton meters is not a lot, so really you just want to snug these up. Hey, and if they leak, you just snug them up a little more. So it helps to have one of these long 17 millimeters so you can get in some of the spots. Anyway, I'm going to get these snugged up and installed. So I have this Craftsman Crowfoot set, and I never use this. But 17 millimeters is, let's see, what is that? 11 sixteenths, I think that's what that says. Yeah, 11 sixteenths. And with a crow's foot, you can get in there to actually torque these to 20 foot-pounds. It's actually 18 foot-pounds. That's 25 Newton meters, so that would look like this. There you go. So you can torque these with a crow's foot. Anyway, I'm going to do the rest of these. Probably have to get an extension to get some of them. know if this was going to work, but it turns out to be awesome. You can get in there, because you can turn the crow's foot whichever way you need to, and you can get in there and torque. You know, if you need it to be facing that direction, or you need it to be facing that direction, and you can get in there from every single angle with that long of an extension and torque everything exactly. 11/16 or 17 millimeter, that works great. But yeah, so there we go. Got all the injector lines on. I'm going to save these caps. Starting to look like a om617. Got my janky little oil pressure gauge there and my bypass. Got the lines hooked up. I ended up cutting a piece of that black hose and making a little plug there for the end. There we go. So what I'm doing now is I'm actually replacing the old, they're like copper plated or copper exhaust and intake manifold lock nuts. Mercedes says not to reuse these. To be honest with you, these would probably work fine. They were nice and tight, snug going on. But I just went ahead and ordered the replacement from Mercedes. The replacement is actually 16 millimeter. The originals were 17. And let's see, I'm not sure who makes these, but there's some part, I guess there's a part number on here somewhere. And there we go. There's the replaced ones. And really, I had to order these anyway because I was missing this one. I guess I lost it when I took the engine apart. So I had to order them, and you can't just order one. So anyway, I just went ahead and replaced all of them. I'm installing the crank pulley too, and these things are a bitch to take out, and they can strip pretty easy. So I went ahead and just ordered some, I don't know what's wrong with my camera. There we go. I just went ahead and ordered some replacements from Mercedes. And Mercedes actually changed these to a grade 8.8 versus a grade 12, because the grade 12, they had a recall back in the 80s, because the grade 12 was a stronger tensile strength, but they would shear. So Mercedes changed them to a grade 8, so they were, you know, more flexible and they wouldn't shear. And I think what Mercedes is selling now is the grade 12. I'm not sure, but that doesn't look like grade 8, but you can't always tell from looking. Anyway, that's straight from Mercedes. That's the replacement, so I'm going to put those in there. And I also ordered some flywheel neck down bolts. These things can vibrate loose, and there is a spec in the service manual. You're supposed to measure the neck down, but don't want those to ever come out. So I went ahead. My camera has given up on me. I don't know why it's doing that. There we go. So I went ahead. Here's the originals. I mean, they still, I'm sure they're still good, but would never want this to come loose. So it was like $18. So I just went ahead and ordered some replacement ones. So I'm going to put that on once I take it off the engine stand. All right, got the front pulley on. Now I'm putting the, this is I guess the water pump assembly or water pump mounting bracket. And again, I put the aircraft sealant, type 3 sealant on there just to hold the gasket on, so I can lower this down into place and bolt it in without the gasket coming off. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on. Just made a mistake. Turns out the water pump assembly cannot go on when the crank front damper's on there, because that bolt right there has got to go right there, and there's no clearance to do it. So I've got to pull that off. I don't have to pull it off, just pull it back maybe like an inch or so. that sucks. Okay, I just put the puller on there and pulled back the crank pulley like an inch. I did it just enough where this bolt would slip through, and I'm going to see if I can get like a socket behind there. Otherwise I just have to pull the pulley off all the way and put it back on. So I just figured out why the camera was getting blurry all the time. The lens right there was dirty. Just wiped it off with my shirt and now it's focusing. But anyway, I went to put on the thermostat housing, and you can't put that on unless you have this on first. That connects the thermostat to the water pump housing. And see, here's the water pump housing. There's where the thermostat housing connects. And when you put those together, that hose connects the two. So you can't change that hose without removing this. And I don't want to do that at some later point because this hose is 40 years old. So it's, I mean, that's crazy. It's 40 years old. It's perfectly fine, but it'll leak at some point. So I'm going to go ahead and order another one of those before I put that on. Also, these are M6 by 1.0, and I guess somewhere along the way of disassembly, I lost one. So I had an M6 by 1.0 Allen head. I just installed that right there. Also, I ran a tap into the aluminum housing. There was a little bit of corrosion, or it was a little dirty in there, and there was a little blue Loctite from, I guess, someone using Loctite years before. So I just ran a little, here it is, M6 by 1.0 tap through all the water pump housing holes, because this is aluminum and these don't need to be tight. You know, you're talking 8 foot-pounds, 10 foot-pounds. So I cleaned that out real good first. Anyway, I'm going to take off this puller and grab the impact and push this pulley back on there. I mean the balancer back on there. And then go inside and order a little piece of this hose. And I'm guessing they don't make it anymore, so I'll probably just have to order some similar size hose and cut it to length. So wow, what I thought I was going to come out here for 10 minutes and put this on. I had to remove the crank, put it on, then put the crank back on, and I had to use just a simple puller works for that. On these engines you can just use 2 bolts and the puller and the rod, and they come off real simple. And then to put them back on, just hit them with an impact wrench and the bolt, and just hit it and it'll go right back on there, no problem. You just want to make sure there's 2 Woodruff keys in there that have to line up in order for it to go on right. Anyway, more videos later. Okay, it's a little loud in here because I have the heater on. It's starting to get cold down here in Georgia, but went over to O'Reilly's and they sell a really good quality Gates 24026, same diameter. So I'm just going to cut a piece off here and make a new hose. That original, you know, is 40 years old. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and then mount this up. Oh, and I'm also going to put in a new thermostat. The thermostat is Molly. Comes with those gaskets. Alright, what I'm also doing is just breaking up some of this. There's a little corrosion on here, so I'm breaking it up with a screwdriver and then going over it with a Scotch-Brite pad and just getting the connection so it's everything's really smooth before I put it on the car. And there we go, that's much better. It's real smooth around here now. I did it on all the, oh, there's a little spot I can smooth out, but I did it around all the connections just to make sure it's a good fit. And there we go. That Gates hose works perfect. So all this is mounted up. So I think now I'm going to put the starter on there. I do have to torque this down to 250, between 270 and 330 Newton meters. That's about 200 to 250 foot-pounds, and I got a torque wrench from the loan program at AutoZone to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little blue Loctite on the bolt and then torque it down. When putting on these front crank bolts, you'll notice that these washers, I don't know if you can tell, yeah, it's slightly concave. So it's kind of spring-loaded. That's what that's for. So you want to put them on where see it's slightly curved like that. You want that facing into the engine. And then we'll put a little Loctite on it here. Whoops, just squirted a lot out there by accident. I don't think you need that much. We'll just brush that on there. And then that is not going to come out. Yeah, put a little bit too much on there. That's okay, won't hurt anything. So now, and the way I get it started with the impact gun. That'll put it in there, you know, up to like 100, 150 foot-pounds. And then I hit it with the impact gun to snug it up. And then you have to put like a, you know, like a socket right here, maybe up against the oil pan, or a socket right here up against the engine block to stop it from spinning. So when you try to torque down 200 foot-pounds, the crank doesn't turn. So I'm going to go ahead and get this on there now. Okay, the next thing, I forgot I had to put the transmission adapter plate on. And there are some dowels. There's one here and one here. They align it. And then you can put the bolts in. And I got to look up the torque specs for these guys. And this is the transmission adapter. Starter goes through there, and then the flywheel goes on after this is on. Okay, I have the intermediate plate on, our transmission adapter. Behind this flywheel there's 4 bolts, and they go to 50 Newton meters. I think that's 36 foot-pounds. And then for the flywheel you have the neck down bolts, which I've replaced with new ones. They look like this, you know, it's a neck down bolt. And these take an initial torque of 30 foot-pounds or 40 Newton meters, and then they take a torque of angle of rotation 90 degrees, 90 to 100 degrees. So I'm going to go around, I'm going to torque these in a star pattern to 30 foot-pounds, and that's stage 1. And then I'll come back and do an angle of rotation so it stretches the bolt. Okay, all of these have been torqued, and I just put a mark on them as I did it so I wouldn't forget. And the flywheel is also lined up and balanced on the correct hole of the crank. But when you torque those down, you need to put a washer up here like this in the balancer so it will stop it from spinning. Otherwise it'll just turn the engine when you try to torque those bolts down. So that's where we're at today. I've got a parts car out there. I'm going to pull a little banjo fitting off of and then plug the end of it so I can plug the manifold here. And then I'll get something to cover up the turbo in case I have you know, it runs away when I crank it for the first time, which I hope it doesn't. But I'll be able to cover up the turbo and kill the fuel to kill the engine if it does. And still need to connect this up, but I'm not going to fill, that's the bypass, I guess, for the thermostat, the water pump. But I'm not going to fill it with water on the initial cranking. And I got to prime the injectors, or the injector lines, so all these are loose. And I'll hook the starter up, which is over there, and I'll turn it over several times to get the fuel flowing, and I'm just going to have a gas can here. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to try that tomorrow.